And there it is. So this is my Mensa membership profile. Cleve Sock Rahis. You might wonder, why am I doing this, or why did I do this? Well, I did it for one basic reason. And it has to do with the type of commentary that I frequently get on various discussions on my YouTube channel and elsewhere on social media. The jealous, insecure racists always bring up IQ, and they feel very proud and full of themselves to be able to say that the average black IQ is lower than the average white IQ. Now, it is very obvious to me, and it always has been, that the only people that concern themselves with averages are people that are average or below average. Those of us who are far beyond average on anything do not concern ourselves with what average is. We don't consider average anything to be something to brag or boast about. We don't aspire to be average, and we cannot relate to being average in anything. And also, we don't have the arrogance and pompous attitude that people who are slightly above average have, those of us who are far above average, because we don't consider it to be a big deal. We consider it to be the way things are supposed to be. We're not supposed to be average. We don't compete with people that are average. So what you have is these, and it's white people that do it. No one else does that. Asians don't do it. Latinos don't do it. Blacks certainly don't do it. It's white racists who do it. Those are the only people that do it. And again, those would be not my fellow Mensa members with the far above average IQs, genius level IQs. We don't do that. We don't need to, because we do not consider, whether you're black, white, or whatever color you are, if your IQ is average, that means it's about 100. We don't think it's a big deal that ours is so far superior to yours. We don't think it's such a big deal at all, because we don't see most of you as being any type of intellectual competition in the first place. Whereas the white races don't seem to understand that if the average white IQ is 100, and you've never taken an IQ test, you cannot presume that yours is even average. It may be far below average. Your actual IQ may be 78. It may be 76. It may not even be 100. That's just average for your group, average for your race. By the same token, if the average for my race, which is Black American, is in fact 85, let's just assume that's true, that has absolutely nothing to do with me. Okay? So it is just as ludicrous for you to assume that your IQ is even average. If you've never taken a test, it might actually be far below. It would be just as dumb of you to assume that mine is average when you don't know anything about me. It would be just as ludicrous for me to assume that mine was average if I've never taken a test. Let's look at some of the commentary. Are blacks the dumbest race? Why are black people so ignorant? Black people intelligence? Black people ignorant? Do black people have smaller brains? Why are black people loud and obnoxious? Black people so rude, ignorant? Black people quotes? Are blacks the dumbest race? Well, in the future, I'm going to be addressing this topic and of intelligence and relative to race, and that's why I wanted to qualify myself before I get into those discussions that I'm going to be engaging in, and those videos I'm going to put out there. And like I said, I'm doing it from the vantage point, number one, of being a Black American with an IQ that is not only in the top 2%, which qualifies me for Mensa, but it's actually in the top 1%, and that is the unique perspective that I bring to the table in this discussion. Talking about race and IQ, so I am going to weigh in on this subject as well. Now, in terms of intellectual capacity, a higher IQ does not necessarily denote that you are more intelligent than a person with a lower IQ. Now, when you have a far higher IQ, such as all of us who have Mensa level IQs, by default, it is a given that we're going to be smarter than the average person. I mean, that's just the norm. I mean, it's obvious because there's such a wide deviation. I'm talking about the fact that if your IQ is 5 or even 10 points higher than the next person, you probably are probably in the same intellectual category. You're not necessarily any brighter than them. You just did better on the test because your IQs are that close. And a 15-point spread, I think, would be meaningful. 5 to 10 point spread, not so much. Okay, so the spread between the black and white IQ is in fact 15 points. It's not 5 to 10, it is 15. You might say, well, are you willing to concede, Mr. Khalif, that whites are generally smarter than blacks based on that 15-point deviation? Well, generally speaking, I could easily make that concession. But there is something we need to take a look at. And one is the fact that there is a cultural bias on the standard IQ test that is in favor of not only whites, but those who are more acclimated to Western society. So I think it is not fair to give a sub-Saharan black African a standard westernized IQ test and expect the same results, even if they have a similar intellectual capacity to a white European person. It is a given that they would score lower on an IQ test that is culturally biased in favor of a European westernized culture. Now, I don't feel that black Americans can use that very same excuse. Now, there is a cultural, because black Americans by default are in and have always been, for the most part, in a westernized European culture. So therefore, it's not like you're so isolated from it that you should not be able to comprehend those things that are relative to that. Now, let me show you some examples in order to make the point. I'm going to put in IQ test examples, images. Okay. Now, most of these have to do with pattern recognition, how you process information, how quickly you process information, that type of thing. Would have nothing to do with culture, race, or any of that. So these types of questions, we cannot use the argument that there is a cultural bias at all. But just scrolling down, looking at an image like this, we can absolutely see that there is a cultural bias. For example, draw what has been left out in each picture. Remember, I am a Mensa member with a Mensa level IQ. But more importantly, I am very acclimated to Western European culture. So immediately I can see the problems. Now, even though this pig is obviously missing its curly tail, that's what has been left out. I am familiar with the fact that this is a pig. A sub-Saharan African may not even know what this is. Also, they may not have the exposure to different types of animals. Clearly, this is an animal. They might think it's something that's more germane to their culture or their region. And it may be missing a tail. They may figure it has a different type of tail. Or it may be an animal that doesn't even have a tail. It depends on what you think. This is not a very good drawing of a pig. I'm an artist too, by the way. And I could draw a better pig than this when I was about 3 years old. So that's not even, that's a poorly drawn pig. But I know what they're looking for. It's missing the curly tail, and you're supposed to draw that there. If you are a sub-Saharan African, you might not have any idea what this is. Okay? But I realize that these two poles here represent a goalpost, and it is missing the line that goes across. Looks like a football field. That is because I am, again, familiar with Western European culture. A sub-Saharan African may not realize that this person is on ice skates. These are ice skates. And nobody skates with just one skate. So I would draw the second skate there that's missing. Okay? Even something like this, sub-Saharan African, who, especially if they live in, I'm not saying that they all do, but there are still some who do. They may live in mud huts or single-story dwellings. They may not be that familiar with staircases to realize or notice quickly, because these tests are also timed, that one of these stairs is missing. There should be a stair here. And in this case, this is a pair of scissors. It is missing the screw in the middle. So I would draw that. And this telephone is missing the cord. There should be a telephone cord there. That type of thing. So, and of course, on this table tennis game, it is missing the net. You see, and it's not just the fact that we can see these things and recognize them. There is a time component. You have to be able to do it quickly. Remember, how much time are they give you? 1.5 minutes. So if you have to sit there and try to figure out what this is, and you spend an inordinate amount of time even trying to figure out what it is, you're not going to do well on that. And if you're not all that familiar with this, you're not sure what type of animal that is, you're not that familiar with this, this, it's poorly drawn, but it's drawn well enough for me to realize what they're looking for. Based on the way that the person is holding the oar in his right hand, that oar would not be going down here where you couldn't see it. That oar should be here, perpendicular to his right arm where you can see it. So I would draw that. In this case, there you have two people bowling. If you're in this position, you would not be in that position after you have thrown the ball. That's the position you would be in before you throw the ball. So this person should have a bowling ball in their hand. And in this case, the lower part of the map of the United States, the Florida peninsula is missing. That should be right here. And they did not include that, so I would draw the peninsula down at the bottom representing Florida. And in this case, she's looking in the mirror, but you cannot see the reflection, okay? You have a suitcase, there's no handle. Anyway, that's the point. So there absolutely would be a cultural bias on any test like that. And here's what's interesting. When they give tests to people from other cultures, they have a secondary type of IQ test that they give. It's called a culture fair test. And it's called a culture fair test because it is supposed to eliminate the Western bias of the test. It's supposed to be equally fair to anyone. So it eliminates much of the grammatical components or the word components of the IQ test. So you don't have to be familiar with the language and the word uses and things like that, because it tries to find how to determine how intelligent a person is, even when they're given a test that doesn't have those words in it, or doesn't use those words or expect you to understand the verbiage of a particular language, which would not be fair to another culture. So they give what's called a culture fair test. Well, you can see clearly that this person is missing a mouth, this person is missing their eye, this one's missing a nose, this one's missing their right hand. If you're not familiar with these type of westernized buildings, even on a culture fair test, especially if you live in sub-Saharan Africa, especially if you're not that familiar with the modern world, you might not realize that if you have a chimney, the chimney peak has to be beyond the building. It has to be. So that's the problem there. And this rabbit should have another ear. There should be the filament in the middle of this light bulb for it to work. Now, these two, a person from sub-Saharan Africa may not be able to ascertain within a short period of time, not because of lack of intelligence, but because of lack of familiarity. Lack of familiarity. They may not be familiar. This has to do with Western postage, and they may not be familiar with how we do things in the Western world. It's missing a zip code, stamp, whatever. They might not see that. They might not even be familiar with something like this and the fact that it is missing a trigger. Now, even if you are in sub-Saharan Africa, I would expect you to be able to recognize that both of these animals, based upon the position of the sun, should be casting a shadow. Only one of them is. Okay? They may not be familiar with this particular animal, which is a crab, and the fact that it should have 6 legs and 2 claws. One of its legs is missing. But if you're not familiar with this, even if you're not familiar with it, you may presume that it would have an equal number of legs on both sides. Any of us who are familiar with crabs, we know that immediately. If you're not familiar with it, you're going to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out what this is. And that could be problematic as well as this. It's not truly culture fair, either this one or this one, when you're not familiar with these two games. This is bowling, this person's missing a ball, and this is tennis, the net is missing. You may not be familiar with cards. And not only that, but this picture is not drawn that clearly. Obviously, the reflection is not matching this image. So that's two examples where even what is considered a culture fair exam gives an unfair advantage and an unfair disadvantage to people that are not thoroughly familiar and engrafted to what we would call a westernized culture. So how culture fair is it, really? Uh, and it's understandable, depending upon a person's level of education and how familiar they are with processing information, that even some of these other examples they might not do that well in for different reasons. Now, everything I just said can be easily validated by authoritative sources such as the American Psychological Association, the American Psychological Association. Okay. I was just looking at this article. I'm going to read part of it to you. Culture free. Are culture free or culture fair intelligence tests possible? Or is success on a test inevitably influenced by familiarity with the culture in which the test was developed? Moreover, let's see how this comes out.
Are culture-free or culture-fair intelligence tests possible, or is success on a test inevitably influenced by familiarity with the culture in which the test was developed?
Okay, I'll just read it myself. That's too slow. Moreover, it is desirable or even possible. Moreover, is it desirable or even possible to adapt Western tests to non-Western cultures? Or should new tests be designed from the ground up to measure skills and abilities valued by the culture in which they are to be used? Many psychologists believe that the idea that a test can be completely absent of cultural bias, a recurrent hope of test developers in the 20th century, is contradicted by the weight of the evidence. Raven's progressive matrices, for example, is one of several nonverbal intelligence tests that were originally advertised as culture free, but are now recognized as culturally loaded. Patricia Greenfield, PhD of the University of California, Los Angeles, argues that nonverbal intelligence tests are based on cultural constructs such as the matrix that are ubiquitous in some cultures but also non-existent in others. And that's very important.